My gumbo tastes second line sweat sweet. Project P Popper potent, rich with po' boys and pecan candy, good for your heart and good for a heart attack. Like strangers turn neighbors, turn instant family members, just sprinkle in some soul. Anything less is just food. Peace. My name is Drew Anderson, and I'm honored to be starting this interview in conjunction with Sankofa Books and Spit That DC with Baba Kalamu Ya Salaam. All right. This brother, I mean, if I told you everything he did, we'd be here all day just with me talking about that. But I will say that he's a writer, a filmmaker, an educator who all his life has been motivated by a burning passion for empowering young people with both thinking and writing skills. He is a playwright, has produced music with his poetry, has been executive director of the Jazz and Heritage Festival in New Orleans, our mutual hometown, for years, and has published, edited, and contributed to multiple books of poetry, literature, and the like, not the least of which is his brand new book, Precise Tenderness, a book of haiku. And the book not only has 100 haiku, but it talks about his process around making haiku, yes, a Japanese art form, but as a Black poet. And it's very specific about what that process is like. And I hope that we have an opportunity to talk about that. So without further ado, peace, Baba Kalamu. How's it going?
I see you got the Chapatulas sweatshirt on or a t-shirt. So you in DC right now, right?
I am, yes.
So when you walk down the street, what happened when people see that?
Some of them know a little bit about New Orleans, so they be trying to figure it out because it's like a vision chart with a bunch of different New Orleans streets on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they all mixed up.
I think Cali, yeah, Burgundy and so forth and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. So some it's a conversation piece for sure. People will be trying to figure it out, just try to make out the words and things like that, and then they need help with the pronunciations. But it's a conversation piece for sure. The shirt is from Dirty Coast. I believe I got it in the airport when I was leaving New Orleans a year ago or so.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is that it starts off with the word Chapatulas, and a lot of us, even though we are born and reared in New Orleans, and take the, we take it for granted and just, but we never stop and ask, well, where did that name come from?
Mm.
Yeah. And we don't know that New Orleans is to use a popular term, is a gumbo of cultures and heritages. So that Chapatulas is from the Native Americans who lived in this area. Mm-hmm. That's where that comes from. But we also had French and Spanish, as well as the English. The English arrived last into this area. And the interesting thing is New Orleans is often known for the French Quarter. But the French Quarter that was originally built up by the French, there was a big fire. And during the time of the fire, the Spanish had taken over. They weren't here that long, but they were here for a long enough period. And so the Spanish rebuilt the French Quarter so that the French Quarter as it stands today was actually built by the Spanish. And if you go through some of the streets in the French Quarter, on the walls, you'll see ceramic plaques. And the plaques, the street signs might say Rue Bourbon, for instance, but the plaque on the wall is going to say Calle Bourbon. That's the Spanish.
Yeah.
So that's how, and so I'm looking at your t-shirt there, and I'm seeing Chapatulas, and I know good and well that most people can't pronounce, if they're not from here, they
yeah,
it looks like it, well, TCHOUPIT. I can read. I said, well, what does it say? What you mean what it say? That's an eye chart. No, it's not an eye chart.
Right.
it's names.
Yes.
Okay, so can you say Chapatulas? I can say, well, what you talking about? And even after you say it sometimes, you don't know, because they look at it, and in English, it looks one way,
Yes.
but you say it a different way. So for instance, in New Orleans, we have two streets, Conti and Tonti. One is spelled T-O-N-T-I, Tonti, and Conti, C-O-N-T-I. But they're pronounced differently. Why is that? Well, one was under the Spanish and one was under the French.
How about that?
That's how, and New Orleans is one of the few places in the United States that has French heritage, Spanish heritage, English or American heritage, and Black folk.
Yeah.
Because once we got the hold to it, we chopped it all up all kinds of ways. Anyway, that's what I got to say about your T-shirt, just looking at it.
See, we ain't even started the interview yet. You already educating me. I sure appreciate it too. And I see them Jazz Fest posters in your background too. I'm looking at mine up here, and my dad definitely was a collector. And speaking of family, my mother definitely wanted me to say this. My mother, Linda Anderson, who back at the time was Linda Langston, she told me she went to school with your brother. She went to Xavier. And she
Kenneth,
said,
yeah, my brother Kenneth.
yeah, she told me to definitely say that she's always respected you for your artistry and your activism. And she wanted me to ask you about a speech you gave back in the day called the Knuckleheaded Nigger Speech.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the specific words, but the gist of it was, this was when I was at Southern University in New Orleans. I was on there a short time. But the gist of it was, we had a school takeover.
Yeah.
And as part of the school takeover, our organization, we basically ran the school, and we would have meetings every day. You come up to the Science Lec Hall, and we would have a meeting people could say whatever they wanted to say, and so forth and so on. And one of the poems I used to do was Knuckleheaded Niggers. And it goes something like, I don't remember, but here's the key part. I would run the poem down, and at the end of the poem, it said Knuckleheaded Niggers. I talk about, all the things. And I said, now raise your hand up in a strong fist. Give us a strong, strong fist. Now tap your hand against your head. How does your head sound to you? Are you a knuckleheaded nigga?
Yes, indeed.
So that was back in 1969.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I definitely see the connection, because my parents both from New Orleans, and my dad used to love calling me a knucklehead. So that I definitely see the connection up in there. All right. Well, look, let's get to this book. This brand new book. Certainly not your first, and I would think not your last. But Precise Tenderness.
Yeah.
It is cool. So let's start with the title. What's tell us about the choice to call it Precise Tenderness.
What can I say? It's like when we at our best, we are tender with whomever we are tender with. And those feelings we have, all of us at one time or another, as I say, I don't know, but at one time or another, we all had a feeling for somebody.
Yeah.
And that may be lodged in our memory bank, right? And at certain times, things happen and we feel it. Well, that which we feel that really moves us is precise. And if we're talking about our relationships with one another, hopefully it's tenderness. So it's a precise tenderness.
Yeah, see, one of my favorite things, having read the book, one of my favorite things about the book, in addition to just the beautifully written haiku themselves, is before and after, in the preface and afterward, you talk about your inspiration to write it, your purpose behind your haiku, your very specific process as a Black writer. And you talk about how, while it is a Japanese art form, you bring Blackness and Africanness to it in very specific ways. So I wanted to hear you talk some more about that.
Well, the thing is, we all, whether we know it or not, we do that, except that we all are not necessarily conscious of everything we do. So the way we talk, the way we walk, the way we love each other, the way we hate each other, also, that's, that's specific to us. We are not always aware of that. So if somebody came here, as they say, a brother from another planet, and checked us out, they would say, Now that brother from another planet is a reference to a movie by John Sayles. And John Sayles did this movie. He's done a lot of things. And I was, at one point, I was a cinephile. That is, I was really deep into cinema. So John Sayles did this movie. And John Sayles is what some of us refer to as a white dude, but he was a radical. And he did this movie, and Brother from Another Planet, the premise of the movie is a Black guy comes to Earth from outer space, and he lands in the United States, and he's trying to figure out how to get back. He can't get back at that moment, so he's active in the Black community. That's where he finds a home, but there are differences, and he's trying to figure it out. And there's this great scene where he wants to be some other place, but he wants to check out what's going on. So he takes his eye out and sits it on the stoop, and the eye will record everything that's going on around him while he physically goes some other place, all right? What I'm saying is, people, what we might call aliens, would come here and see us, and they say, I've got to check this out because this is something different from everything else. And what would they check out? Imagine yourself an alien, and then look at yourself, your surroundings, the people you're with. Just pick a random day. After this is over, pick a random day, and on that day, make like you're an alien and you're closely examining everything. And that's what I think we fail to do, and that's why we don't see everything about us. And we think it's just like the T-shirt you wore. I know what Chapatulas is, and I recognize the street names, but somebody that's not from New Orleans, to them is just letters. Why are you wearing that? You understand what I'm saying? Well, it's the same thing with our heritage. If you don't know the origins, you're lost. And you say, well, why are you doing that? What does that mean? So forth and so on. Except that most people will not ask you that. If they don't understand something, they just move on and overlook it.
That's real.
But we are Chapatulas. So we got to check out each other. Yes. That's what I would say about that.
Yes, indeed. I'm telling y'all need to check out this book, because there's a lot that the brother talks about in here about how the process of doing haiku and breaking them down, talking about revising the haiku and making them melodically, making them fit not just on the page, but also through performance. So let's talk some about that, because you're a veteran performer and writer, and you talk in the book about the importance of your work having to stand up on page and with performance,
Yeah.
competition and innovation and things of that nature. So talk about this relationship between the page and the stage with poetry.
Well, with poetry, it's deep and it's complex, but it's also simple and everybody can grasp it. I believe in what I call a jazz aesthetic. And in most of the schools, they don't teach a jazz aesthetic. So they don't teach, for instance, with a jazz aesthetic, when you're doing something and you're in the presence of other people, you try and make it collective so that everybody participates and nobody is a performer on one hand. On the other hand, somebody is is the audience. And there's a separation between the performer and audience. Well, you can break that down because in the jazz setting, when it's really, as they say, when it's really cooking, or as John Coltrane says, it was Sonny Rollins who said that the audience becomes a part of the performance. Mm. And so when we're really doing our aesthetic, the audience is part of it. Now, I use the form, we have the form, which, this form, this book form, that's quote unquote the European form. Hmm. We had writing in different parts of Africa, but we didn't have books like this. You understand? So I was trying to figure out what are we going to do? What can I do to bridge that gap? So I look at the poems as lyrics, and they're just devices to help me figure out what I want to say. In fact, I made my birthday on the 24th of March. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a haiku a day, every day for the next 100 days, from 24 March, the next 100 days. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm on, I don't know what number, but the haiku, I have the haiku numbers, but they're not, how can I put this? It's not like 1 through 10. These are the selected haiku. So some of the number that it jumps, but I tried to keep it moving forward so we wouldn't get lost. For those who are following, let's see, we're on page 34. This is haiku number 58, just posted today, as they say, hot off the press. It was posted today. Black people believe. Black people believe. They believe in God. Black people believe in God. And I believe in, and I believe in Black people. Amen.
Amen. See, that reminds me, that speaks to at the end of the book, you talk about how some people hear you do haiku and they think you're cheating because the exact 17 syllable count. But I see you just did that. If they look in the book, it's 17 syllables. But in your delivery, you expounded on it. You had some intentional repetition going on. You had some rhythmic things going on, and it changes it for performance sake. I see what you're doing, I believe.
See, you peeped it already. I can shut up and go back to sleep now.
Well, see, while you got the book open, I did want to ask you about a couple of haiku in particular.
Sure. All right.
Okay, so since we're talking about some New Orleans tradition, haiku number 33 on page 20.
Okay.
If you would like, Baba, I'd like you to read that haiku and explain.
Oh, yeah. White cloud hunters. Chant. White cloud hunters chant feathered literature. White cloud hunters chant feathered literature on innocent eyeballs. Now, the white cloud hunters are a Mardi Gras gang. Some people call them Indian tribes. Mm-hmm. And there's here you don't see the asterisk. It's just in smaller print at the bottom of the page. It says the white cloud hunters are Mardi Gras Indian tribe.
Yes.
But if you don't know what the Mardi Gras Indian tribes are, so that doesn't, it doesn't really help you. But the white cloud at Mardi Gras time in New Orleans, the Indians come out on Mardi Gras Day and on St. Joseph's Night, which is a whole nother story. St. Joseph's Night comes from New Orleans used to be the major destination for Italian people. At one time, there were more Italians in New Orleans than in New York. And so St. Joseph, and when the Italians came here back in the day, the Americans, the Gentiles, howsoever, the white people, howsoever you wish to refer to them, they did not accept the Italians as being the same as they were. In fact, they used to call the Italians dirty whites. Mm. And when I say call it, I mean, like in the Times-Picayune, the paper of record back then, they would have dirty whites. They'd put it in print and everything else like that. And so they were referring to the Italian people, and they wouldn't even talk about us. But as we come up to today, in modern times, we look at what has been done. And right now in New Orleans, to a certain degree in Mobile, Alabama, because that was the first place that the French arrived, quote unquote, into the United States area. Mm-hmm. The Spanish hit up Florida first. But anyway, in the United States area, Mobile, Alabama was the first place. And Mobile has a Mardi Gras, but it's don't hold a candle to New Orleans.
You can't tell them that.
You don't have to tell them that. All we say is how many people celebrate in Mobile. Mm-hmm. That'll tell you right there. You know, how many Indian tribes y'all got there? Mm-hmm. You know, the Mardi Gras Indians. How many balls? Y'all got a Zulu? Mm-hmm. Don't get me started.
Everybody got Zulu. Huh? Yeah, I've just been hearing that lately, like in recent Mardi Gras, it'll be Instagram pictures and videos from Mobile. And I'm like, I'm glad y'all doing y'all thing. That's cool, but I don't know if you want to compete. That's cool. I'm happy to see that somebody else somewhere else is celebrating Mardi Gras, taking it seriously. But as far as saying it's better than or anything like that, I don't think
they can say it was the first one, that it preceded New Orleans. That they can say, and that's true.
Yes.
But that's like saying, you know, that just because you preceded your baby brother, that makes you better than your baby brother? Oh, no. That just means you came here first.
Yeah.
You know, ask your mom about that.
I heard that.
So that's where that come from. But anyway, back to the poem you were asking about, the White Cloud Hunters.
Yes.
There's a story behind that particular poem. I wrote that as a result of, believe it or not, being in DC. I was working with the Smithsonian, and every year down on the mall, they honor a state. And that year, Louisiana was being honored. Mm. And I was also the executive director of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation. So I knew a lot of the people, and when they decided to go honors, they asked the Jazz Fest to participate. Mm-hmm. So I knew, quote unquote, knew personally a lot of the people that were there from New Orleans. And one of the Mardi Gras gangs or tribes that participated was the White Cloud Hunters. Big Chief Charles was anyway. I was asked to, on the microphone, introduce some of the New Orleans people, and of course, I was glad to do that. And I interfaced a lot with the White Cloud Hunters, so I decided to write a haiku, and that's what it's referring to, not just the White Cloud Hunters, but specifically it came out of that time when we did that thing on the mall for the Smithsonian.
See, this is why I like to ask about poetry, because some people say, you know, I know poets who say they don't like disclaimers and like explanations, and if you have to explain the poem, then the poem wasn't finished being written. But I kind of disagree with that. I like to know the story behind the piece. And with the brevity, particularly of haiku, all that you just said would have been missed. I never would have known the origin of the piece. Because
Right.
to me, number one, as a piece of New Orleans culture talking about the Indian tribes, but also that phrase you had about feathered literature.
Yeah.
And how I can imagine you may have been alluding to the fact, you know, it's a Smithsonian, so it's a museum, it's educational, it's cultural, and they're giving you stories through the feathers, through the apparel, through the headdresses and everything that they wear with the suit, the dances and the chanting and all of it. It is literature. It's valuable. It's a griot tradition, but now in a different form. You think?
Yeah, well, that's possible, but you give me credit for being much deeper than I am. I'm just
Well,
I'm just here doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And with feathered literature specifically, that two-word phrase, feathered literature, is, I believe that literature is just a form of concretizing what was, if you will, spoken. And so however we talked, that was, quote unquote, once it's written down, that was the literature. Well, with the Mardi Gras Indians, rather than write it down, they put it into the suits they were making. And they made these suits, and it was distinctive about the Mardi Gras Indians in New Orleans is every year around carnival time, we make a new suit. And they work on that all year long. So that every carnival, you're supposed to be, if you're keeping in the tradition and you have decided to be a Mardi Gras Indian, you make a new suit every year.
Yeah.
Now that suit is your literature. That's you putting everything you have into a concrete form.
Yes.
And the book is one form, but that Indian suit is another form. So I said feathered, referring to the suit, literature, referring to taking something from the abstract and putting it into a written form. In this case, it's into a form of the suits that they wear. I could go further and further, but I want to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that reminds me, the brother Flag Boy Giz. I know we just got the time warning for, we got a little less than 10 minutes left on this free Zoom thing, but we gonna be as concise and meaningful as haiku definitely is. But Flag Boy Giz, MC, the bounce rapper and Indian member from New Orleans, he had a song called The Outside. He had a video burning his suit to make sure he made a new suit the next year. And the whole was showing the suit be consumed by flames. But I want to get back to the book right quick. You got one on page 89 called St. Louis Cemetery Crypt. I want to talk about that one.
That was part of a series of poems that were written in 1999. I was asked by the then editor of Essence magazine.
Yes.
And Essence was going to be in New Orleans, and they wanted to celebrate the turn of the century in New Orleans. And I was asked to write some poems. I wrote about, I think about 14 poems in that series, specifically about New Orleans. They chose to use, I think, 4 of them in Essence magazine. So that's what that refers to. Now, St. Louis Cemetery Crypt has to do with St. Louis Cemetery is number 1, 2, and 3. They're in different parts of the city, not too far apart, but in different locations, these cemeteries. And the distinctive thing about New Orleans in general is that the city is below sea level. So you can't dig like 6 feet without hitting water in some places in New Orleans. So they had the crypts, which were the burial plots. They were actually built above ground, and they're like little houses when you see them. And so that's what that refers to, St. Louis Crypt.
Yes.
And so if you understand that this is above ground, like a little house in a cemetery, and it says, bones float in raised stone, white, altered graves, blood transformed, become black souled thrones. And there's a lot in there that I try to do. But just to use one example, blood transformed. The blood could be our heritage, how it's been transformed. But blood transformed could also refer to just how our people transform whenever we touch. It's all kind. And the thing is, if it's done right, you don't even have to explain everything. People hear words and they take it and go different places with it.
Yes.
And so it's just like in New Orleans, you hear a Mardi Gras, not Mardi Gras, but you hear a second line coming down the street. You may not even know the person who died or who's being celebrated, but you hear it, and if you got time, you join in. If not, you just enjoy it as it passes by. But that's what that tradition is about. And just as a tata, parting gift, there's a song one night, about 9 o'clock at night, band comes marching down the street and they playing a song. Now it's against the law, quote here, to play music after 9 o'clock in the streets, but they do it anyway, So anyway, they're coming down the street, and what are they playing? Atomic Dog. But as a brass band doing it, and it's got a different kind of sound when that happens. But that's an example of what I mean by you take what you find and transform it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's beautiful, Baba. Well, look, in this 4 minutes, I wanted to ask about one more haiku.
Okay, go ahead.
On the next page, page 90, it makes you go, ooh.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the phrase buck jump, because that's something that I heard growing up in New Orleans that I don't think everybody gonna know what it means.
All right. Well, buck jumping is just a form of dancing, but it's like you're jumping up. How can I put this? You see people may have seen pictures of the Maasai in East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania. Tall, and some people would say elongated. They're not, they're more vertical than they are wide. So they're thin brothers and sisters. Yeah. So the dancing that some of the Maasai do is you jump it up and down. In New Orleans, when people really be getting with the music and dancing in the streets, they call it buck jumping. And I don't necessarily know if that's where it comes from, but that's what it reminded me of. I had the opportunity to be in Tanzania for a little bit. Yes. and see. I mean, I was in the marketplace one day, and all of the marketplace was lively, it's louder noise. All of a sudden, it started getting quiet. We're gonna have to do it again. Okay, it started getting quiet, quiet, quiet. And before I knew it, I looked around, and there were about 4 or 5 Maasai coming through. And they didn't say a word, but everybody parted and made room for them as they came through. They had on their traditional dress. They had their spears in their hand. One said a word to nobody, and nobody said nothing. They just got out the way and let them come on through. And I remember that. So it makes you go, ooh. Sing of lusty foods, so savory, they buck jump across your tongue's dance floor. Sing, lusty foods, so savory, they bug jump, they make you cross your tongue's dance floor. People don't think about the tongue, the language. That's a dance floor.
Man, once again, poetry, the gift that keeps on giving, because everything you're saying means more than one thing. Well, Baba, we running out of time here. We down to our last minute. I could talk to you forever about just what this book means, Precise Tenderness. But I want y'all all to check out Precise Tenderness by Baba Kalamu Ya Salaam. You can check out his website, kalamu.com, kalamu.com. All right, but definitely please support Precise Tenderness. And it has been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Christina, for hooking us up. And Christina, that picture on the cover of the book was done by a sister down, I believe she's in Atlanta, Tracy Morrell. And I didn't know her, but I got hooked up with her. She did the cover, and I got hooked up with her through the brother that Michael Samanga, who's also in Atlanta, who was responsible for the book being put together. And so, Christina, I know you can relate to that cover, you know, of the Black woman reading. And
all right, family, please excuse us. We were cut off a little bit previously, but I didn't want Baba Kalamu to be cut off. I wanted him to definitely have the opportunity to explain the image on the cover and relate it to our guest, our host who brought us together in the first place, Christina Richardson from Sankofa Books. Just beautiful sister who's done so much to connect people and support Black art and Black business and Black everything. But in any case, back to Baba Kalamu Ya Salaam, who was telling us about the cover of Precise Tenderness, the new book of 100 Haiku.
Yeah, the cover was done by a sister in Atlanta, Georgia. And she was contacted by the first person who was the editor of Precise Tenderness. He's also in Atlanta, Michael Samanga. And he turned me on to this piece where we were discussing during the book. He said, you know, he knew of this sister and she did some beautiful work. And when the book came out and I got copies of it, I was so impressed by the beauty of the cover. I called Samanga and said, man, do you have a phone number for the sister so I can, you know, call and let her know I appreciate what she did. And he gave me her phone number and I called her and we talked for a while. And she actually did not do that piece for the cover of the book. That was some artwork she was doing, and it ended up winning some kind of award or fellowship or something in Germany, of all places. Plus, you know, she's done a lot of work around here. But then when Samanga asked her about doing a piece for the cover, she said, well, I think this might work for you. And she sent it to him, and then he sent it to me. And the beauty of that cover is that it's, first of all, it incorporates the red, black, and green in a way that, most people would not necessarily first think of red, black, and green when they see it, but it's definitely there. And I just was so impressed by what she did with that cover. And we talked, must have talked for about half hour on the phone, talking about how she put it together and the work that she does. And it's just a beautiful black cover. The artwork is just, it's tremendous. That to have a black woman reading a book on a cover in front of a green sun, the sun being our the wheel of life, and also our hope for the future, and so forth and so on. And I can't say too much about it. It's just beautiful. Precise tenderness. That's it. I don't know what other people think, but I dig it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially now that you explained it like that and told the story once again, I definitely think it connects to the beauty of what the book brings and what precise tenderness means and what you're delivering. So I love connections. I love when a cover, they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but I love when the cover is an extension of the actual meaning of the piece, and meaningful in its own right and meaningful in the context of what's inside the book. So much respect to the artist. And I know you were making a connection earlier to, Christina being somebody who has always encouraged people to read. Has worked at multiple bookstores right here in DC. And so the sister reading obviously is a strong connection and a shout out in that sense.
Yeah.
So, Christina, for bringing us together.
Yeah, well, Christina has done tremendous, she's exerted tremendous effort into making things work. People see this right now and they just turn it on and appreciate it and so forth and so on. And they don't realize that somebody had to do the work of figuring out the technicalities and all like that and testing it out. So she did it. She did it. And that's why I mentioned Christina for the work that she's done, and put me in contact with people such as yourself. Drew, I don't know you, but I know you now.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And when I come down to New Orleans, I got to find a way to build with you, connect. I know I know you're connected with the Ashe Community Center.
That's where I live. Yeah.
That's a bet. See, I didn't know that. I know Brother Wood. I know him through poetry. And I've been trying to get my show from Gumbo to Mumble down there. So I've been talking back and forth with Brother Wood. But next time I come to New Orleans, I got to come check y'all out and just see how we can connect, because I mean the history lessons I've been getting and the lessons as far as things that I still can learn about poetry and the craft. I think that just like I only asked you about like a few haiku, you explain in the book your process for writing and rewriting in some cases and connect to rhythm some of these haiku. I think you could do the level of conversation that we had about just a couple haiku. I know you could tell the stories behind the technique and the inspiration of these haiku, and that would be powerful conversation. I mean, every haiku is its own story, I'm sure, just from the things I learned just from talking about the few that we have talked about.
Yeah, so, was there any other one that you liked?
I mean, that wasn't, see, I had a different list for the ones that I really liked. Those are the ones that I had questions for, but I had a whole other list for ones that I just plain enjoyed for other reasons. So let me see my little list here. That I asked you about the main ones I wanted to ask you about. The ones that I listed as my favorites were, see, I'm gonna just list them, but I'm gonna ask you about a particular one. I loved one, 14, 18, 20, 23, 32, 40, 46, 48, 49, 51, 53, 54, 58, 50. It's just a bunch. I got a whole list. But the ones that weren't numbered and were named that I wrote, I really like The Spice of Life.
Uh-huh.
BB Explains Why, and You Can't Survive on Salt Water.
Yeah. That is well, The Spice of Life is part of that series that I wrote for Essence magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And Cayenne in Our Blood. We dance, eat, laugh, cry, and love. Cayenne in our blood. We dance, eat, laugh, cry, and love with peppered passion.
Yes, indeed. So much going on there. With
And what's the other one? He was so. Oh yeah, You Can't Survive on salt water. That was a series of poems that were written as a result of hurricane that passed through here.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and it really it messed up a lot of stuff. But anyway, and it's 7 haiku
Yes.
for Old Orleans, and that's a play on New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Saying, you know, this is the old city.
Yeah.
There's so many of them. I'll read. I'm going to read the first one.
Okay.
This is after Katrina. I'm from the lower ninth ward of New Orleans. We went down there, and I live now on Attaché, uptown, not uptown, but right above Canal Street,
Mm-hmm.
right off the expressway. But I went down to there and to the lower ninth ward and saw how it had been destroyed because the levee broke in the lower ninth ward along the Industrial Canal.
Yes.
And the water, just destroyed major parts of the lower ninth ward. And these were, some people might believe these are, what you would call surrealistic poems. But these were actually based on stuff. So, dead dogs hang from trees. Bloated barges sit on the wrong side of levees. Dead dogs hang from trees. Bloated barges sit on the wrong side of levees. That, it just really happened.
Yeah.
I'll read one more. Number 6. Things that go bump in the night. Your boat against a dead baby's body. Again, this was a good friend of mine had that experience in a boat trying to get out, and the boat actually bumps into a dead person floating in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7. This was the last poem in that series, but it was also the last poem. It's also the last poem in the book before I have the essay on writing haiku. A son returns, finds 4-month-old bones. A son returns, finds 4-month-old Bones wearing his missing mother's dress.
Yeah.
And that's something that actually happened.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people had to leave, and they couldn't hook up with all of their family.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they could get back, and they didn't let us back in immediately. Mm-hmm. And it was a waiting period, then you could come back in. That's why the 4 month. And when he gets back, that was, you know, if you can imagine finding your mother's bones, mm-hmm. but the bones have the dress that you recognize as your mother's dress. I mean, it was just, yeah, it was a rough thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that makes me think of something that you said in the forward when you talked about joy and pain.
Yeah.
Because you said it's all together, and you managed to talk about all of that. Like, I mean, you talk about intimacy throughout the haiku. You talk about politics, so to speak, or social activism. You talk about Mandela. Yeah. You talked about the culture of New Orleans, which is obviously so rich, but you educated. I grew up in New Orleans. You know, I spent the first 17 years of my life there. And just through this conversation, you've educated me on things about our culture. Some was refresher, but some was new knowledge. And so you talk about, yeah, obviously, you know, the tragedy of Katrina and everything that happened, but it's all here. Just like you said in the forward, it's all in here. The joy and the pain is all in the book. You talk about the things that make us elated, the things, it's precisely tender. It is. There's so much in this book about, and I'm inviting people to definitely check it out. It's called Precise Tenderness by Kalamu Salaam, 100 Haiku. And the book not only has the haiku themselves, but also talks about the connection of coming from an African place as a writer, while dealing with a Japanese art form. It talks about bringing rhythm, bringing mama say, as you say, bringing just experimentation to everything that's happening with the writing. So between the content, the style, the explanation of the technique, and who's writing it, and all the history, the particular history of New Orleans that's throughout this book, I think it's a must read. I think it's an institution. I think that you could do a whole college course just about this book, between or maybe like a documentary, just as far as what they're saying, how they're saying it, your desire to write haiku and why, your relationship with Sonia Sanchez and your relationship with Langston Hughes' work and Richard Wright's work, and how those things influenced and inspired you to get into haiku. While I'm here, I mean, before we get cut off again, but if you could tell us a bit about your origins with haiku and how you got into it and where you're taking it. I'm gonna make that maybe the last question.
Okay, well, I don't remember when it was that I ran across Richard Wright doing haiku, but it was at the beginning of my writing career. I started in when I was in the 7th grade at a high school, Rivers Frederick Junior High School here in New Orleans, located in the 7th Ward. The building is no longer there, but that's where I started writing. And during that period is when I found at the main library books by Richard Wright. And now there's an edition of his haiku poetry. It's called Haiku. I believe it's called Haiku, yeah, by Richard Wright. And I had, like many people, had known Richard Wright primarily as a novelist, and then as an essay writer, 12 million Black voices. And he wrote about traveling. He, of course, went to France, lived and died in France. And his daughter, Julia Wright, I correspond with her from time to time. And he impressed me so much. And so that's where I started in terms of the haiku. He was the first person. And the second person that had a major influence on me as a haiku, in terms of the haiku, was Sonia Sanchez, because I knew Sonia and we worked together on projects. She lived down here in New Orleans for about a week with us, and over the years, you know, and so I knew about her and knew her, and then of course her work got into her work, and she did a lot. She does haiku and different form, and tanka, another Japanese form, 5 lines. So I really got into that. And then of course I got into other, as the years went on, I got into other people, but I always wanted to do haiku in my own distinctive way. So it doesn't, people can read it and read the haiku and never think of a Japanese form, and it doesn't even, sometime on a page, it doesn't even look like, you know, you don't think about 3 lines, you just read it.
Yeah.
And since you bring it up, I'll tell you part of the secret of the book was not revealed to me until after the book was out.
Mm.
You know, you can do stuff and it was not your intention to do it that way, or to be that way with a person or whatever, or you go someplace, you know, you're just supposed to check this out or check that out, or your teacher assigned this, or your mother asked you to go pick up something, or your boy said, "Come with me, man. we're going to do such and such." I said, "Man, I don't feel like it." Come on, or you can just ride along with me. All right. And you ride along, and during that trip, something just touches you. Well, you can't say you planned that. You didn't plan it. Well, in the same way with this book, there's aspects of it that I did not plan.
Mm.
You know, I didn't plan to have the cover that it has, and some of the effect. And so I'm still discovering aspects of it. And what I'm saying is that when we do stuff, nothing is ever over. It may end, but it's not over. It's in us. If we're really doing it on a serious tip, if we for real when we do it, it doesn't leave us. It stays in us forever and ever. And so with this book, there's so much that's there, that's happening, that I didn't plan. I can't say I planned it that way or the other. So yes, Richard Wright was my first influence in terms of writing haiku, specifically haiku. He wasn't the first person I got into. That goes all the way back to Langston Hughes. Mm-hmm. And then Sonia Sanchez was a contemporary. That is, you know, we worked together on projects. She has been down here and stayed with us in New Orleans, you know. There's a lot I could, you know, talk about, but that I'm saying that's where it started, but that's not where it ended for me. And I always wanted to do haiku. Specifically, I wanted to do haiku as part of a jazz aesthetic and figure out how to do that, how to put the music in, how to put the mama say, how to use rhythm and rhyme. Because most of the haiku don't rhyme. I use rhyme on the slide. You know, people, you don't even know, because it's not like always at the end of the line.
Yeah.
It's something, but if you say it out loud, you hear it and say, oh.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing, you know.
Yes. Well, see how you say it's never over. You just stop.
Yeah.
That reminds me of at the end of your preface, you said, although these are a significant bulk of my haiku, I did not include every haiku. Plus, I am always writing more. There is always more. More to explain, more to discover, recover as in rescue, become, project, all things in time. A luta continua, the struggle continues.
Yeah.
I think that's a fitting way to close out our interview and just let folk know about the magic of precise tenderness, something that they all need to check out. So thank you, Baba. I've really super enjoyed this interview. I could learn so much more from you, and I look forward to doing so. And I hope that next time I come to New Orleans, or one of these times, I mean, Lord knows, next time I go to New Orleans, it's going to be Essence Fest. So it's everything all over the place. But one of these times, I got to come down there and just kind of sit at your feet and learn some more and check out the Ashe that I've heard so much about. And just build. I've learned a lot in this last hour and some change. And I'm glad now we got a part 2 that we can bridge on to the part.
Yeah.
Folk can check that out and hopefully be encouraged to learn more about all the amazing things that you've done and are continuing to do, because I've been inspired and I think that inspiration could reach to others. So thank you, Baba Kalamu.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you.
All right, Drew. We're going to make it happen.
Yes. Yes.
You know, whether you and I hook up formally and in person, or whether we just keep carrying on as, you know, Black people that are trying to link to our heritage, our past, and move on into the future. That's all it's about, you know. And you can't go forward if you ain't never been backward. That's all
Sankofa. Peace to Christina and the whole Sankofa family. Yes, indeed. Well, I thank you once again. We're gonna post this. Make sure y'all can check it out and get a taste of this wonderful conversation, this enlightening, nourishing, artistic conversation. And we're looking forward to more. Because like you said, there's always more.
That's right. Always. Take care.
Peace, Bob.